Hey, makeup friends. So, you've probably seen an influx of videos from people reviewing the newest collaboration between Odin's Eye and three different creators here in the beauty YouTube world. And so, I thought I would take a different approach, and rather than do a traditional review video, I'm just going to do eye swatches and I'm going to talk over it so that I can give you some insight into my experience with these shadows. Because I did find that how they applied with a finger swatch versus how they apply with a brush are quite different. So just showing you finger swatches, I don't think is going to give you the full picture. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about this collection. So there are three palettes available in it. It is called the Perfect World Collection, and it's done in collaboration, obviously, between Odin's Eye and three different creators. We have Batty Bean, Makeup Just for Fun, and Lauren May Beauty. So the palette that I'm currently applying to my eyes is the Flora palette, which was done in collaboration with Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun. And this color story honestly is my favorite of the three, and this is one that I have worn actually a couple of times already. And in fact, actually received a compliment from a stranger on my eye makeup one day when I was wearing this, so that always makes the heart feel good. But this palette is not without its problems. There are some shimmers, and this is going to hold true across the board for all three palettes. Some of them are very difficult to work with, and it almost feels like they're hard panned already, and they look more like toppers once applied, but you really have to work to apply them. The mattes, however, in this palette are quite nice and they blend out really well. So I don't have any complaints about the mattes, but the shimmers, I prefer a more foiled kind of finish, and there are some of those in this palette, as we're going to see, but not across the board. Anyways, getting back to the collection, it is going to launch at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 14th. The palettes can be purchased individually for $33.90 US each. I really don't understand the Odin's Eye pricing. Like, why not just $34? $33.90 just seems kind of cumbersome. Neither here nor there, but it always makes me giggle when they do that. You can also purchase all three of them together as a bundle for $91.95. Again, why not just 92? But I digress. This is going to be a limited edition, and my experience with Odin's Eye with their limited editions is that it's likely going to sell out quickly. They will probably do one restock, and then that will be it. So if you want to get your hands on this, it's kind of like entering the Hunger Games. At least that was the experience that people had with the single shadows that released recently, as well as the Christmas palettes back in the fall of 2022. And I know there's a lot of people very disappointed about that, so I did want to just put that on your radar so that if you are interested in this, set your timer and set your alarm for 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Valentine's Day. This, I think, if I recall correctly, this is the only swatch that, for whatever reason, my camera liked the eye that wasn't being used better, and it refused to focus on this one. So sorry about that. The entire swatch is like this, but it does give you a good idea as to the blendability of these shadows. Also, I did want to point out that I started off strong with these eye swatches, and I would go in and do a second layer of the matte shadows just to build them up and show you how they built up. And then my eyes started screaming almost immediately. So you will see going on in the rest of this video that I really only apply one coat, if you will, for most of the shadows. I think there are a few where I do reach back in. And then when we get into the shimmers, you'll see that I apply it with a brush and then I top it up with a finger just so that you can see what the impact of that is as well. Also, just so that you're aware, I didn't use an actual eyelid primer for these. What I did was I used a little bit extra of my concealer, brought that up around the eyes as well, just to mask the discoloration that I have on my lids, and then I set it with a loose setting powder, just a very, very fine dusting of it, just so that we had a clean canvas to work with and that every swatch was treated the exact same. So that was the process there. Now, one thing with these palettes that kind of stuck out to me, and I know I haven't shown you a picture with all three of them side by side yet, that is at the very end, but I'm basically working on the assumption that you have seen these palettes at some point, whether on Instagram or in another video here on YouTube. Regardless, the color stories that were matched with each creator, they weren't necessarily intuitive for me. Now, I will admit that I'm not super familiar with Amanda's work, so I'm not sure if this is a palette that would really resonate with her or with her typical style of makeup. But in particular, Batty Beans kind of made me like sort of tilt my head a little bit. So I'm not sure how much involvement the creators had in terms of choosing each specific shade, or if they were sort of presented with options and chose from there. The ODEN'S Instagram posts do say that they were created or curated by the creators, so I'll take them at their word, but they just, I don't know, they're just a little bit of a disconnect for me, and that's neither here nor there. I mean, it's the palettes have to stand on their own and the eyeshadows have to stand on their own, and regardless of whose name is on the cover of the palette, I'm particularly interested in the shadows. So I do want to be clear here that any criticism that I do give about the performance of the shadows is not directed at the creators themselves at all. This is just me talking about how these shadows actually applied. And in particular, the one that I'm applying right here, this is the kind of shimmer shadow that I love. A lot of sparkle, a lot of impact. Look at how well you can build it up. And I really think I could achieve that same look with this formula of shadow by packing it on with a flat shader brush. The brush that I'm using in here is from Sonia G. It's called the Worker brush. So it is flat, but it also is a little bit fatter in terms of the bristles, so you can use the edge to blend things out, but it wouldn't be my first choice for actually applying shimmers. However, the reason that I wanted to use it for here was so that I could blend those edges a little bit more easily than I would with a really thin, flat shader brush. This shimmer shadow, it struggled a little bit. I mean, it's there and the color's very pretty, but it just didn't have as much of a like wow factor as that lilac shade on my other eye. And again, these criticisms are not directed at the creators, but what I'm hoping that this video can help you with as a consumer is to decide if these shadows are what you're interested in. Because I've seen a lot of people commenting like, I really want to support my favorite creator and this and that and the other thing, and that is honorable and that is fantastic and it's completely understandable. However, I just want to remind you, and it's going to sound a little paternalistic of me to do so, but you don't have to buy a collaboration in order to support your favorite creator. So if there is anything in these palettes that you're like, well, I really like XYZ person, but this color story really doesn't do it for me, they're not going to be offended if you don't buy it, and they're never going to know if you don't buy it. And you can support them by watching their videos, by giving them thumbs up so the algorithm likes them, by leaving comments so that there's engagement, by just being nice to them and decent human beings. There are a lot of non-monetary ways to support creators that still help them, that still show you care, and allow you to spend your money where you truly want to spend it. I'm not trying to dissuade you. I just think there's a lot of times where I see posts, even by my fellow creators, they'll post a new product and then say, run, don't walk, and I'm obsessed, and everybody needs this, and set your alarms, and all of that kind of thing. And I think that can create a lot of false pressure on people. And I think if we can step back and really look at shadows objectively, it's a little bit harder when they're tied to creator, especially one that you've been watching for a long time and feel that kinship with. But I think if we can remind ourselves that at the end of the day, it's colored powder in a palette. And do we really resonate with that color story? This shadow that I'm applying here is a little bit too close in tone to the other one for my liking. I wish there was a little bit more of a distinction between the two of them. There is obviously a difference, but if you just put one on and took the other one away, I wouldn't be able to tell which shadow it was, one to the other. So in a palette where there are only, 10 shadows, each shadow needs to bring something. So that's a little bit of a drawback for me. Now this palette here, this is the Sea Talk palette. This was done in collaboration with Lauren May Beauty. And I have been watching Lauren's work for years at this point. I'll admit I don't watch every video. I don't watch every video of any creator, to be honest, except maybe that chapter. But he's not a beauty creator, so different category. Anyways, I digress yet again. It's a common theme around here if you're new. Anyways, this one was done with Lauren May. And this is the most challenging color story for me. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you've got the 4 shadows that are very neutral in tone. I love those. If that was just like a little quad, I'd be perfectly happy. And then you have like a bright pink, and then there's this sort of chartreuse green, and then some blues in there. And again, if the blues were in a little quad on their own, I think I could work with that as well. But you mix them all together, and I don't know, somehow when I look at it, I just don't see a lot of different looks coming together. I see like chartreuse with the blue. I see the browns on their own with maybe pink along the bottom lash or something like that, but I don't see a ton of looks in my own mind's eye. That's not to say they don't exist. That is to say, me personally, this one, in terms of color story, well, this palette specifically ranks number 3 out of all 3 for me. And it's not just the color story. That's why I kind of paused there. The mattes are doing well, as you can see. I mean, put a pin in that. We'll get to the darker shades in a minute, but these neutral-ish sort of mattes are great. They're fantastic to work with. I've only gone in with 1 layer of application, and there's really no splotchiness. There's really no issue. It's totally fine. Where I ran into problems with this palette were the shimmer shadows. And again, we're going to get to them, but I've structured this so that I did all the mattes first and then did the shimmery shadows because I was trying to avoid as much like glitter fallout as I could. Now, with the exception of this shade, because it's not really a shimmer, it's not really a matte, it's more like a pearly kind of finish. But I wish that this shadow was a matte, and I wish that it was more impactful than it is. I think that this would have provided like a really nice contrast with the blue shades that are in this palette. But this one's just a little lackluster for me, and it just kind of fades away into nothing as you're blending it. So even using it as a transition shade, it just doesn't have that like oomph to it that I was really hoping for, and like it looks like it does in the pan. So this one, frankly, it disappointed me. The color is beautiful. I would like it to have more intensity. When I use it again, I will try using different bases underneath it to see if I can really punch that color up, but going in with it as I did for these swatches, just with a little bit of concealer on my lid, you can see the results there. Now, like I said, we were going to get into the darker matte shadow, and this one struggles. This one struggles. You certainly can work with it, and you can build it up, and you can blend and build and blend, but I had a little bit of a challenge with it in trying to get it even. And so you'll see that I spend a fair amount of time blending on this, and this was a shadow that I did dip back in. Basically, anytime you see me look down like that, like I just did, and then apply more shadow, it's because I'm picking up the shadow, and I wanted to leave that in just so that it was very apparent to everybody when I have gone in with a second layer. So I just want to be transparent about it. I'm not trying to sway anybody. Buy it, don't buy it. That is not my choice. That is entirely your choice. What I'm trying to do is just show you what these products look like upon application. And I've seen better navy blues. Like, I don't even know that this would really qualify as navy. I would call it more like a denim blue because it's not deep enough to be a true navy. Navy adjacent. Let's go navy adjacent. It's a pretty color, but it struggles. It needs a little bit of help, and maybe a darker base would help, but I wasn't doing that for the purposes of this video. Now, these shimmer shadows, so this one, and then I believe there's one more in the neutral sort of quadrant, they applied beautifully. And these, again, are the kind of shimmer shadows that I really, really like. I love them to be high impact. And with this one, you can apply it with a brush and it shows up really nicely, but you can also just build it up with the finger. I have no complaints about this one whatsoever. And then going back to my other point where I was talking about doing mattes first and then shimmers because I was trying to basically avoid as much glitter fallout as possible. You will see as we get through this that there are going to be some matte shadows that look like they have glitter in them. I will sort of point them out for you if I can remember to do that as I'm doing this voiceover. But they don't have glitter in them. Sorry, I just distracted myself. It's just leftover glitter. I did my best to wash everything off between, but by this point, my eyes were screaming. And in fact, at some point, I think when we switch over to the third palette, you will see that my hair is straight. I've got hair dye staining my face. It's a separate day. I had to take a break. I actually had to take a full day off and then finish the rest of these shadows on the third day because I was in agony. Now, this shadow here, this is another disappointment for me because looking at it in the pan, it looks like it's going to be this really intense, sparkly pink and that it's going to have some like depth to it, like more like a fuchsia kind of color and not so much. This is one of those ones that very much looks like a topper to me. It is pretty. It's just I'm disappointed because it doesn't look like the shade that's in the pan. And I was expecting the shade that was in the pan. And this is just sort of, no pun intended, but like a watered down version in the Sea Talk palette. Again, it's not that I dislike the color or the shade or anything like that. I do think it's very pretty. It's just not what you see in the pan. Frankly, same with this one. This one, I think, if I recall correctly, between the chartreuse one and this one, these were the two most disappointing across all three palettes. And I think I'm going to give it to this one as being the most disappointing because it just, even with the finger, doesn't really build up. And it's just kind of a non-color. Like, yeah, there's green in there. It's sort of sea foamy, but it's sort of translucent. Like it's a very ho-hum kind of shadow, this one in particular. And I just was not in love with this one. And even looking at it, watching this like playback, yeah, it's not one that I can see myself being like, ooh, I can't wait to bust that one out again. It's just not my favorite. These next two, however, they do sort of redeem the rest of the palette. Again, though, not my favorite, if I'm being perfectly honest. The single shadows that they released, they are more impactful on the eyes. I had a better time applying them with a brush. They came to play. These ones, you pretty much have to apply them with the finger. They don't really go on with the brush. So as I'm talking and watching this playback and reminding myself, I don't think that they redeem nearly as much as I initially said because it just, I don't know, there's frankly, and I'm sorry, but there are better out there. I'm just got to be honest with you. So yeah, you can see the glitter's getting a little out of control over here, but we're getting down to the nitty gritty of it. All right, so into the last shade in this palette, and it's a deeper sort of shimmer shadow. And the base pigment is quite nice. Like you'll see as I blend it out that pigment does blend out with it, so I like that. But there's a little bit of splotchiness, so these are the kind of shimmers that if I'm going to go ahead and wear them, I'm probably going to put a glitter glue down first, or at the very least just not set the primer that I use so that there's as much tackiness on my lid as possible to really grab onto these. Now, having said that, I did not use setting spray in applying these. I really just wanted to show how they apply straight out of the pan. Using a setting spray is going to help, so I will certainly be trying that in future, but I didn't want to do it for this video because I just wanted to show how the shadows work. So there you see it. And now we are moving on to Batty Bean's palette, and this is called Planet Spirit. And it is a very, very fun color story. I did actually wear this on my eyes in a recent video. It's just not something that I would reach for every day, but when I want to play, it's a good option. I like the bright colors. Again, I'm not entirely sure that when I look at that palette, Betty Jean would immediately come to mind for me, but I mean, I've seen looks that she's made with it, and of course, she's horrifically talented. Like, she is just a phenom, and she always looks amazing, but this color story just doesn't scream Batty Bean. That said, it is very pretty, and these mattes perform really nicely. I was initially a little bit concerned, having done the other ones, that this one would be a little bit patchy, but as you can see, it blended out beautifully. The pigmentation is there, and there's really no patchiness in this shadow at all. So very, very impressed with this one. And then going in with this sort of, how would you describe this? It's sort of a turquoisey kind of greeny blue. Oh God, this is why I don't try to describe colors. I'm terrible at it. But I mean, you're looking at the same thing I am, so you can see what we're talking about here. It leans more heavily on the green. It does look a little bit blue in this video. And in fact, if I recall correctly, this is the one that ends up looking like I've applied two shadows. Yeah, it does. So it looks more blue in the transition area, and then it looks greener on my lid, but I promise it's the same shadow. So I can't explain that sorcery, but it is what it is. I will say from having worn this, it is beautiful. It's you have to pack it on a little bit and you have to like build it up as I'm doing here, but it is really, really pretty. The look I did had mainly this as like a transition shade, and I had done like a cut crease type thing. And this shadow performed really beautifully for me. And then I'd put like the pink and the purple underneath my eyes, and it was like a spring dream. It made me really happy. So this is one where you see those sparkles. That is not in this shadow. That is just remnants from all the other swatches. And then we go in with this gorgeous, vibrant orchid kind of shade. That's what I'm going to go with. It might not be orchid, but that's what I am going to go with. And it is beautiful. And again, I was a little concerned because sometimes these more like neon leaning shades can be really powdery and really dusty and just blend away to nothing. And these did not. These were fantastic. In fact, I would go so far as to say that these performed better than the neons that are in the Blend Bunny Surge palette. I really struggled with those ones. These apply like a dream. As you can see, tiny little bit of patchiness along the transition area just under the inner brow part, but that could be easily blended out. This was me getting very fatigued. Oh, no, this was new. This is me trying to get it done. You can see the hair dye over by my ear. Yeah, that's what I bring to the table. I can't remember if I'd got it done the day of or like the day before, but I could not get that off of my hairline, so it is what it is. Anyways, now going in with the orange. I love this shadow. I do think this is so, so pretty. And honestly, I would love like a blush like this, like maybe not quite as intense, but like leave your best matte orange blush recommendations down below, please. Because everyone that I can find that's like the right color that I want has freaking shimmer in it. And I just don't F with shimmery blushes. I think I have maybe like one or two, but they're just not something that I really gravitate towards. So this color in a blush though, very pretty. Yeah, just moving my eyebrow out of the way. I didn't bother doing anything with my brows in these. So those are natural, unfilled, unglued, unbeaten into submission brows. That's what my brows look like, in case anybody was wondering. And then this shadow here looked a little bit more red in the pan than how it translated on my skin. It comes off more like a strawberry red, if you will. Like it's definitely leaning towards the pink side of things, which frankly is fine. It works with the rest of the theming of this palette, but if it had been a little bit more true red, I think that just would have brought a little bit more versatility to this palette. You have that orange in there. You could do a little bit more of like a sunset kind of look. There are already some pinks in there, so I would have preferred that this was a little bit more towards a true red, but be that as it may, I still think it's a really beautiful color, and I think it makes my eyes look super green, so loving this one as well. And okay, we spent a lot of time looking at the camera. Yep, we get it. We get it, Kara. Move on. Move on. Sorry about this. Wow, that seemed really long. Anyways, so then going into the shimmery shadows in this palette, they're so pretty, but they're just really frustrating to work with. Like really frustrating to work with. This one looks more like a topper. You could probably get away with wearing it as a highlighter as well, although the pan is pretty small, so I'm not sure which brush you'd use for that, but I think setting spray is going to be absolutely key with these, and maybe even a glitter glue base, as I had said earlier. So it is, like I said, a very pretty color. This is something that I would wear mostly like inner corner would be where I would stick this. And I think having a little bit of color in the inner corner just makes things look a little bit more different, a little intriguing without being too over the top. So I especially like to do that when I'm like trying to sort of wear a little bit more neutral makeup. I wouldn't necessarily put like this color in the inner corner, but this one is beautiful. Again, this is the kind of foiled shadow, shimmery shadow that I like. This is beautiful with setting spray. This was part of the look that I did using this palette. And with the setting spray, it applies just like full bore. Like it does not mess around. And so I start to wonder, like, if you can have some shadows that perform like this one, why don't they all? I I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, it is actually a genuine question. The consistency is not there for me across these three palettes. And I normally do like the Odin's Eye palette or formula quite a lot. Like, I did not have any issues with the single shadows that were released. I've never really had any issues with any of their palettes. These ones were just, they were just a little bit challenging, frankly. Now, this shadow is really pretty though. This one is like an orangey red, but then you can see it has that like gold glitter in it. So this is one that actually does have the glitter in it. It's like a matte base, but with this like micro glitter all throughout it. And it's just so pretty. I think that this would make a really pretty one and done shadow, frankly, because it's different enough in terms of that base color, but then that shimmer just brings it to life, especially when you add a little bit more right across the lid like this. Like, I just think that's so pretty, even just on its own. So that is a shadow that I can see myself getting a lot of future use out of. Again, these colors also just very flattering on my eye color, so I hope that everybody's good with like super up close eyeball looks, because that's all I'm bringing to the table today. All right, now into the purple, and this again is another one that I really enjoyed using. Didn't have any issues applying this one. And so again, it just brings me back. Like, I'm just wondering, those ones that look more like toppers, they have like a little bit of like a duochrome shift to it. I don't know if that requires like an entirely different formulation, and that's why they're so sort of weak when you first apply them. I'm not really sure. That Chartreuse one in the Sea Talk palette that just didn't really have any impact to it. It didn't have a duochrome, so like I don't know. I'm just curious about it. I don't know. I don't know the inner workings of makeup development, but this shadow I can say is beautiful. And it's not really a color I ever tend to reach for. Like, when I think purple, that's not the purple I think of, but in seeing it, I think I need to reach for this color because it is just so pretty. And this palette just screams like spring summer to me. So I'm very excited about it. It was actually really nice out today as I'm filming. So you've got that sort of sense that spring is just around the corner, but I live in Canada. I know we have a lot of winter still left to go, unfortunately. Oh, you know what? This was another top contender for least favorite shadow. This one was very frustrating as well. It could be, if I'm to be fair, it could be that it is very similar to my skin color, and that's why I'm really not seeing it show up all that much. But I really had to go in there and load it onto the brush and really spend some time applying it to get it to really show up with any sort of intensity. So you can see me going in with the finger, and now it's built up. But I think that this either needs setting spray or to be just applied with the finger as is. So there we have it. Those are all 30 swatches on my eyes. They were very sore, but I do want to congratulate all of the creators that are doing this collaboration with Odin's Eye. There's all three of them together. I know I've been critical, but I'm just being honest about the performance. But anyways, there we have it. Thank you for watching, and be a decent human being. Bye for now.